Was that the best premiere of any Star Wars program we've seen? Let's talk Skeleton Crew episodes 1 and 2. So this will be my full spoiler review of all my thoughts and questions of episodes 1 and 2 of Skeleton Crew. So if you haven't seen it yet, save this video and come back later. So let's talk about all the little references and thoughts I had and everything that I loved from the first 2 episodes. Let's dive right in with that opening scene. From all the trailers that I saw, I expected a more light-hearted show, and it opened up much darker than I expected. But that opening scene was an incredible nod to the opening of all Star Wars as we know it, A New Hope. And once all the dust settled, are we assuming that was Jude Law? Because that's what I'm assuming. But I have some questions that we'll get to at the end. But now, let's get to the kids. We start off at AT-ATN, and we see these kids playing with toys of their heroes, just like I did when I was a kid. And I thought that that was super refreshing and a super way to really connect to the audience. The RX droid piloting the school bus was great for me because I am a Star Tours nerd and I loved seeing that little character. Once we get into the school, I noticed a little something fun as we see Wim playing with what seems to be an Etch-a-Sketch. Great 80s nod for this 80s vibe show. But when the lady from the supervisor office comes in and starts explaining the testing and the society and these kids being assigned a role at this age, it all seems a little fascist to me and a little strange that this is going on within the New Republic. And it leads me to another question I'll have at the end. We have some more parallels to A New Hope with both Fern and Wim both longing for some sort of adventure and some sort of drive to get them off of this planet. Very Luke Skywalker in A New Hope. And then we get to the shot of Wim lying in bed looking up at his toys, and I just got the biggest E.T. vibes off of that shot. Again, continuing with those 80s movies vibes. And then the next day we get another Star Wars nod where we see Wim on his speeder rushing through the forest and giving us real Return of the Jedi speeder bike chase vibes. For me, from the trailers, I got the feeling that all 4 of these kids were friends going into this adventure, and it turns out they're not, which I think adds an extra layer to the dynamic of the characters, and everything's not all buddy-buddy, and I think that that's going to play in nicely as the show progresses. When Wim starts talking about Jedi temples, we get a nice little Rebels nod in there as he talks about some temples could sink into the ground to hide. Once they were on board the ship, I noticed another really cool little 80s reference as that cockpit came alive when they finally got the power on. It really reminded me of the cockpit of Flight of the Navigator as the seats just kind of appeared. Very 80s again, like everything is given that 80s vibe and I am here for it. And then they reference the barrier, which leads me to more questions that I'll ask at the end. We meet the pirate droid SM-33, and if you are not a Peter Pan nut like me, you might not know that is a nod to Mr. Smee, the sidekick of Captain Hook, and I absolutely love that reference, let alone the droid. And when the kids encounter SM-33 for the first time, we're really getting a sense that Fern is kind of a badass, and I'm really excited to see how that gets her either into trouble or out of trouble as this show progresses. As Wim and Neil explore the ship, we get a very Goonies-esque scene as they come across the pirate skeletons. They put on the pirate clothes, the compass. It's a very Goonies scene, once again giving us more of those 80s movies vibes. And when they make it to the pirate lair, base, whatever you want to call it, there's some little nods in there that a lot of people might miss. For one, there's a little creature from the long retired Disney 3D show Captain EO. Again, from the 80s. And we also see a little clip of a circus or something being performed, which if you don't know, is directly from the Star Wars holiday special. When it's time for Wim to pay for his food, he pays with what we now know are Old Republic credits, and in mint condition. And then we start learning that AT-ATN, the place where these kids live, is something of a mythical planet, the lost planet of eternal treasure, which doesn't really describe what we saw in that first episode. So this is going to be an interesting story as we go on. But very well could explain why there was a pirate ship buried in the jungle on the planet's surface. And then the last thing I loved was seeing SM-33 in action. Guys, Disney knows how to make droid characters because they are all so much fun, and SM-33 is no exception. But now, I have some serious questions of what's going on in this show. And if you have theories as answers to these questions, I would love to hear them. Please comment and let's talk about them. Question 1, in the beginning, when they take over that ship, they bust into the vault and there was nothing there. I have a feeling that the captain knew that there was nothing there. So, what was he looking for and what were they really storing in that vault before the pirates got there? Question 2, in the school, they talk about the great work. What is the great work that this planet is doing, and why is it phrased like that? Question 3, as the ship is taking off, the kids mention the barrier, and then later on the droids talk about the barrier. Why is there a barrier to this planet? What is this barrier? Because it was pretty easy for them to get through. And why didn't the kids know what stars were? My next question is the obvious one. What is at Aden? Why is it hidden? And is the planet the kids from really at Aden? And does the great work have to do with the eternal treasure? And finally, at the end of the episode, we meet Jude Law's character, Jod. If he could use the Force to get the key and escape that cell, why didn't he do it before the kids arrived? What was he waiting for? And of course, who is Jod anyway? Jedi? Sith? I guess we're all going to have to watch to find out. But I absolutely loved this episode. I can't even think of a criticism I have at this point. It was everything I was expecting it to be, which I had high expectations based on the trailer, so I am so glad it lived up to it. But I want to know what you think. Did you enjoy this episode as much as I did? Are you digging the 80s vibe of the show? Do you have any questions that I didn't have? Ask them in the comments. Let's see if we can figure this show out as it goes along. And if you don't already, subscribe to my channel. Let's talk more about this show in the comments, and let's review it every week together.